Good, welcome. So, do we see a red light? On air, okay. We will come to order, and I think we will start with the call to order and the roll call of commission members.
I'm Mark Silverman.
Justin Ford.
And Michael Human. And now we have the Pledge of Allegiance. Okay. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So do we have any announcements from commissioners?
Mr. Chair, before you do that, I just want to make a note for the record that Commissioner Stefan is an excused absence, and we'll make a note accordingly. And for those in the room who are maybe wondering why we don't have 5 people up here, we have a vacant position as well. So that's why you have 3 commissioners on the dais this evening, but that's a quorum. So we will be able to conduct business. Thank you.
Good. And do we have an approval of the agenda?
I'll make a motion that we approve the agenda.
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
And oral communications, public comment for citizens wishing to address the commission on matters not on the agenda. Do we have any persons desiring to address the commission for matters not on the agenda? So let's move on to approval of the minutes. Do we have a motion?
I move.
I make a second that motion.
With those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And new business, a request for a sign permit for a wall sign and a zoning clearance permit for exterior updates to the building, including new paint and colors and finishes for Yum Sushi located at 23536 Calabasas Road within the commercial Old Town zoning district. Do we have a staff report?
Good evening, Commissioners. The staff report was under item 2, and there was also a few exhibits for some photos there, as well as the sign plans and so on. And there is a presentation that I'll be presenting this evening. And so with that, good evening, Commissioners. First off, I want to mention that this hearing notice for this evening's meeting, it was posted on the city's website. It was also posted at all required locations. Staff did not receive any public correspondence or comments regarding this project. These permit items are typically ministerial in nature, meaning that they would be reviewed and approved by staff. However, because the subject property is located in Old Town, your commission has the authority to review and make recommendations to the appropriate approval body regarding all projects within the commercial Old Town zone. And that's why we are here tonight.
Good. Do we have any comment or discussion?
If you have some questions on what he just said, by all means. Did you have a question?
Any questions?
So Joel, you're continuing after, if we don't, yeah, okay, I'll wait, yeah.
Okay.
Good.
So to start off, Yume Sushi is located on Calabasas Road in Old Town, across from the Leonis Adobe, as you can see to the north in the image there. It's also next to the Mulholland Restaurant and other retail businesses. So the first item is the sign permit. The proposed sign is a 3-square-foot wall-mounted sign centered on the front of the building beneath the roof eave, identifying the new business name, as you can see there. That is the logo for Yume with channel letters that are composed of gold with a satin clear coating. The sign will be composed of a stainless steel for durability, and the sign will not be illuminated, as illuminated signs are not allowed in Old Town.
Joel, will it say Yume Sushi or just Yume?
This is just saying Yume. So that is the Yume Sushi was on there on the staff report. That's the full name of the business, but the actual sign will just say Yume.
Okay. And the building next to it, what color is it? Do we know that?
The one that you can see in the image there.
Oh, it's kind of a similar color to what it is now then, kind of like an off grayish color.
That's correct. Yeah, it's an
Okay.
offish gray color, and then the building, the Mulholland, is kind of a cream beige white color.
Okay.
Yeah.
I would only remark that it seems to be a dignified sign that comports well with the community.
If I just may invite the commissioners, maybe you'll hold off on questions, comments till he's done. This is actually really short, probably only 5 minutes.
Okay.
Good, okay.
Yeah, I have a few more slides, basically going over the sign plans, exterior proposals. So it'll be a few minutes, and then we can hold some questions. So this image here shows the channel letters and details with how the sign will be mounted upon the building face. The sign does meet the requirements of the Calabasas Municipal Code that allows for one building-mounted sign per street frontage for a multi-tenant building within the Old Town Commercial Zoning District. And then in that code, the maximum sign area stipulated is 10 feet, and thus this sign is well within that 10 feet as far as there's a lot smaller sign there, about 3 feet in approximate size. Moving on to the zoning clearance. This is a separate permit item. So this is the proposed exterior updates to the building. And so Yume Sushi is proposing to repaint the exterior facade of the building. As it appears, the existing exterior has not been painted for, I believe, well over 10 years. I went back in time and looked at some images, and I could see that it was an original kind of off grayish color going back to about 10, 12 years or so. And normal wear and tear has impacted the overall aesthetic quality of the building. And so the new owners and the applicants are looking to update that exterior. And so the applicant has already installed new building code compliant main double wide glass doors to replace the previous existing wood doors that were there due to incompatibility with the building and safety code. And so there was some ADA compliance there as far as height. Those old wooden doors did not meet the building and safety code as far as height goes. And so these new doors that have been replaced do meet all building and safety code and ADA requirements. So the overall proposed paint color changes to the building exterior include a change in color scheme to a gray otter tail color for the body of the building, a darker oiled teak trim color, and a dark blue navy color for the panels of the building. And I should also mention that the materials would not be changing, so this would be paint over the existing materials, wooden materials that exist right now. So it just basically be a new fresh paint coat on those, on the exterior of the building. And so with that, moving on to staff conclusions, as mentioned, the sign permit as well as the exterior changes do comply with the Calabasas Municipal Code and the Old Town Calabasas Master Plan and Design Guidelines. The staff report included a bit more detail as far as going through the individual findings for the Old Town Calabasas Master Plan and Design Guidelines. The project is also exempt from CEQA review, and based on the facts and the findings made in the staff report and the analysis, staff recommends that the Historic Preservation Commission provide a recommendation to the Director of Community Development as to whether the proposed wall-mounted sign and exterior changes comply with the Old Town Master Plan and Design Guidelines.
If I may just add one I'll call it procedural note, and I think we may have, or Jill probably touched on this in the very beginning. The building is not a historic structure, okay? This is a later building that has characteristics that are consistent with the Old Town, because that's something that the city has tried to do over time. But it's not a historic structure, and it's not adjoining one, so there's not a historic impact assessment of any kind that even applies. So you're looking at this with your Old Town Coalition hats on as to whether it's appropriate for Old Town based on our guidelines. That's it. Thanks.
Thank you, Tom. And then just one more last slide here, basically, which is the recommended action. And so basically kind of, in other words, rephrasing the previous recommendation that I just mentioned on the previous slide. And so staff requests that the Historic Preservation Commission adopt a motion that would reflect that recommendation to the Director of Community Development. As Tom had just mentioned, whether it meets the overall consistency and conformance with the Old Town Master Plan Design Guidelines. And with that, thank you. I'm available for any questions.
Any questions from my fellow commissioners? Yes.
So on page 3 and on page 5, the buildings don't look the same. Is that, or maybe I should start with, when is this opening?
In the room are representatives from the restaurant.
Uh-huh.
And when you're done with questions with staff, that one, by the way, I don't think we can answer, but they may be able to answer. The chair will open public hearing, and you'll be able to invite testimony from persons in attendance. You can ask them questions directly.
Because I'm trying to figure, on page 3 and page 5, the building looks different.
Are you referring to the photographs attached to the staff
Yeah.
report?
Yeah.
Are you talking about the rendering on
Yeah.
3, on 5 versus the picture on 3?
Right.
So the rendering, I should mention, the rendering does have the new doors, as mentioned, that new double wide glass door has been installed.
Yeah.
And so it may not reflect 100% with the rendering, I believe, should have that double wide glass door.
Yeah, it does.
It's a bit confusing though, because the photos do have those wooden doors still against the building facade.
Right, right.
And so they haven't taken those away yet.
No, I happen to like the proposed exterior.
Mark, please use your mic.
Oh, sorry. I happen to like the proposed exterior on page 5 rather than the picture on page 3.
No, staff agrees with you on that. I mean, that's why, I mean, generally speaking, we try to present projects with neutrality
Yeah,
and recommend consideration and action by a commission without
Yeah.
trying to influence the commission per se, other than to provide the facts and analysis. But our analysis ourselves, we come to that conclusion.
Yeah.
Now, I do want to point out, based on your question, this photo is of the same building at the same time, and you can see, if you can see where the pointer is going,
right.
the old doors removed right here were replaced by this door here. You can see how short these doors were. Okay, they're leaned up against there. And I remember when I walked over there to look at this building probably, I don't know, 4 or 6 weeks ago,
Yeah.
the doors were still installed, the old ones. And I felt like to walk up to one of those doors, you're walking up to a 1965 tract home. It looked completely incongruent, and those are the doors that have been removed.
Yeah.
So that's a
Right.
good thing. This door set right here, which is the main entry, as Joel pointed out, has to meet accessibility requirements, and the ones that were there before didn't even come close.
Sure.
So this was necessary, and we believe it's an improvement. It's not a historic building.
Yeah.
It's not. They've matched up with the, with the height and the rhythm of the
Right,
windows and the other openings there.
Yeah.
So we believe it meets the guidelines, and we'd invite the commission to open the hearing.
Yeah. I like the proposal. It looks very Old Town, Calabasas, Western. I'd ride up there in my horse.
You should.
Okay. As soon as I get a horse, I'll do
Yes.
that.
Good. Well, should we open it to a hearing? And
I was going to make a comment first. I like the color scheme. I think it goes with generally what's, the guidelines as well. One of the guidelines says all colors should harmonize with the surrounding natural and built environments. Earth tones are encouraged, with brighter accent colors allowed. So I think of the yellow as a brighter accent color allowed. In earth tones, I feel like, a gray is an earth tone. The blue, it pops. I wonder how it works with the other buildings around it, harmonizing as well as being an earth tone. That's just the only thing I'm going to comment on. But I think generally the look is great, and I think it generally does meet the requirements. So,
Is that a little patio out in the front there?
Let's, if Chair Human can open the public hearing, we'll move on to that.
Yes, let's open the public hearing on this, and do we have anybody who would like to address us on this proposal?
Did the speaker cards get turned in? We do have some cards. You didn't fill one out, right? No, you didn't fill them out. Well, if you'd like to speak, why don't you just come up here and you introduce yourself, and I can collect the cards later. Is that all right? This seems really intimidating, but don't let it bother you. It's really not.
we're probably the least intimidating group
State
of
your
people.
name and
My name is Michal Zilbermint. I'm a part owner in the project. Yeah.
Welcome.
Thank you. What would you like to know?
I'll just make a comment first. I welcome the concept of a sushi restaurant in Old Town. I look forward to that.
Yeah.
But do we have any questions of my fellow commissioners?
Is there a patio in the front there?
So there is a little patio in the front.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can you have tables out there, you think, or?
If we're allowed to do
That's-
it, we will.
yeah, that's something that might be able to be worked out later as they go through the building
okay.
permit process. We'll have to wait and see.
Yeah.
The right-of-way line is tricky through there, and there's also a city easement that winds in and out along that section of Old Town, and until all of that gets reconciled with their final plans, we wouldn't know for sure if they have outdoor seating. They also have a liquor license involved, and so what they can serve outside, typically people will have a beer or sake or whatever, sushi, and they
Beer
may
and
have
wine.
limitations imposed based on their alcohol sales. We won't know. I don't imagine they know either, but that's, what they could do outside.
Yeah.
Thank you. Looks terrific.
Yeah. We own another sushi restaurant in Studio City.
Oh,
So this is going to be kind of the same, a little bit bigger.
great.
Good. Good. Well, what we have before us is a sign permit. I think that's the scope of what we're considering right now.
It's the sign permit. It's the sign permit and finding that the sign is consistent with the guidelines for signs, for building mounted signs, and also
Yes.
under the zoning clearance, which we would normally, for any other thing like this anywhere else in the city but in Old Town, would have been reviewed at the staff level just for consistency with applicable codes. This one has to go through your body in addition to that. So that's why you're looking at the color scheme for the building. We would have looked at it. We have looked at it. We believe it meets the standards and guidelines. If you agree, you'll make your own motion and make a decision. But that's where staff stands. You're going to be deciding those two things.
Okay, unless we have any further questions, I think we could move on to the motion.
I was going to ask, Tom, help me understand if we go to picture 3, is the sign just,
Which one's
sorry, back, is the sign just the metal, or is the sign also that long rectangular on the top that's painted blue? I mean, what's the sign in this case?
Well, the sign that
Oh, I see what you're saying.
that was shown before is a little different than this one. This was the rendering for the exteriors. I'm sorry, this was the rendering for the exteriors. And you can see here it says Yumi Sushi, but I believe the sign now is just going to say Yumi. So that
And the
was
sign's only the wording, and
That's
it's not
correct.
that blue.
It's just Yumi. Yeah.
Okay.
shown here, shown on this slide here,
Yeah.
okay?
Yeah, so the sign plan there reflects the overall sign that's going to be on the building face. It initially, when they did that exterior, was from a while back, and so that was the initial proposal, which was revised to these sign plans that were submitted that states UMA.
Which is even smaller still.
Yeah.
10-foot limit, and I think this is 3 square feet or something like that, so.
Okay. Can I ask staff, do any other signs or painting of buildings in that area have, I mean, I know we reviewed the Mulholland not too long ago, so that was basically a metal sign on a flat part of the wall, if I remember correctly. Do any other signs or buildings there have like a kind of a bright sign, you know, bright colored sign, the Yume part of it, and then kind of a blue kind of for that part of the sign in the area? Or is this, will that blend in with the environment is my question.
I don't recall seeing any other signs for other businesses in Old Town that have this actual color scheme or something like it per se.
Okay.
Dictating colors or trying to regulate colors can get a little tricky because you're now tiptoeing on the edge of free speech. And logos and colors that are associated with logos are things we cannot and should not regulate.
Okay.
So when somebody says this is their business and it has a color, we accept it for what their business and their business colors are.
Okay.
If I just may add, the sign is going to be like champagne gold. It's not bright at all. It's almost stainless steel with the bit gold. It's very subtle. It's not.
Okay.
It's not like in your eyes, you know.
Like flashy or something?
No,
Okay.
it's definitely not.
Okay, thank you.
Well, I have one comment, and I find myself thinking, what did Old Town look like 100 years ago? And I wonder what the color and sign schemes were. I think our mission today is to preserve the overall sense of it being an Old Town. And at least for me, this is well within that. But I look to my fellow commissioners whether we are ready for a motion.
Yeah, I make a motion, we approve it.
I'll second.
Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Good.
Thank you, members of the commission. I really appreciate everybody thinking it through, and
Congratulations.
we look forward
Good
to
luck.
working with the applicant as they continue their work. They're doing a complete remodel, as I'm sure you can understand, on the indoors. So a lot of work with Building and Safety Department and County Health Department. So at least they're through this stage of it. This was the easy part.
Congratulations, good luck.
I look forward to a good sushi dinner. Thank you. Now we get to some business of real historic import. The next item on the agenda is discussion regarding the Park Modern Pump House.
excuse me, I've teed up the next item by mistake. I didn't have a PowerPoint for the pump house. We sent obviously a written report. We didn't have anything to add to what was in the written report. For persons that are watching, and in case they see this slide, that's actually the next item. But the pump house is a remnant structure from Park Moderne, a subdivision that was created in the late 1920s as an artist retreat colony. And it was one of the features that they championed at the time was that you had water that would be available via this common well and pump. And unfortunately for the developer, this happened right when the Depression, the stock market crashed and the Great Depression started. So only a handful of lots maybe were sold before that. And so Park Moderne sat as an empty subdivision, if you will, for most of its initial 2 decades or so. The pump house never really got used, the pump and everything, because the individual residences that went in, the cabins for the most part, had their own wells. They just went ahead and put in their own wells. So we don't have a pump house that, to our knowledge, ever really functioned in the way it was planned, but it is there. That was its purpose. It's on private property. And a lot of the literature that we've seen, and you'll have a photograph that is attributed to be the pump house, but when you go out there and look at the pump house, it doesn't look anything like those photographs. So we believe there's been some errors on the part of some of the historians or volunteer historians or what have you, and they've inadvertently put a pump house picture from some other structure that is not the one that's actually there.
Oh, wow.
So, but that doesn't mean it's any less important for us in its actual form. We just want to make sure that as we would move forward with anything, we're not going to include documentation that is incorrect. So one of the things we're going to want to do, if this is something the commission would like for us to pursue, is to correct the record as well. So I do want to make that point as a point of emphasis, and then Joel has maybe a few things to mention as well.
Yeah, and to go on to what Tom was saying, the image in the historical resource survey that was prepared for the city, that is the correct image of the pump house, and we also included a couple images there on the exhibits that have the current. We went out a few weeks ago and took some current photos of the pump house, and so I'm glad Tom mentioned that. If you, for example, go onto Google and you type in Calabasas pump house, there is an image of what appears to be a pump house that may have existed in the Park Moderne area. However, that is not the same pump house, and so we wanted to just make sure that the public was aware of that, just because it can be confusing. There is I believe a CSUN historical image category that does have that different looking pump house. It has kind of that more modern design and aesthetic, and so we just wanted to make sure that the public is aware that this is what the current Park Moderne pump house actually looks like.
So Joel, it's got a humongous oak tree right next to it, and it's got a power line or power pole? Like exactly, is that what it is right next to it?
That's what it appears to be. We're not 100% sure what that specific utility line would be, but it appears to be some kind of power line.
Is this in somebody's backyard?
Oh,
No.
side
It's a separate parcel. It's under the same ownership, but it is a privately owned parcel. Within that kind of oak tree area, there's a gate basically around, or excuse me, a fence around.
Well, I might make some comments about it. I've lived in the Bird Streets area for 35 years, and as you walk the neighborhood and are impressed by the relatively few things that are old, that you can really tell are old, the pump house stands out. It's one of maybe a couple features within the overall neighborhood that really screams out that it goes back, early. And it's got a crack in it, which you can see. It needs some care and reinforcement, or it's not going to last. I have a question about the status of the property right now. I'm guessing it may be in transition. Just walking past it, it has that appearance. Very recently, it was rather nicely cleaned up. I say that because for some months there was a period where there was a car parked in the driveway with leaves on top of it. But so it, the property may be in transition, but the pump house is sort of at one far corner of the, maybe it's two separate parcels of the property, the house being somewhat uphill. And on the other side of the house, there was once a horse that was named Nugget. Makes me think of your comment of riding a horse to Old Town. Nugget was the last horse that lived in the Mulholland, in the area, in the Park Martin area. But so that home, sort of, the home and the pump house are, there's part of the neighborhood, and the pump house is something I'd really regret losing if it ever came to that, either through neglect or for, if it were even demolished or something. It's, when we speak of historic preservation in Calabasas, to me that pump house is one of the first things of which I think. So I do hope that we manage to find a way to take care of and work with the owner of the property to take care of it.
It's a little bit, I agree everything you say, Michael. It's a little precarious location with the oak tree like right there. Like it looks like in the picture it's butting up right against it. Does that have any bearing at all on whether it can be denoted as a historical landmark, or that doesn't really matter? I mean, it's just, is the tree going to knock it down eventually or not? Or does that even matter?
Having to worry about the tree versus the structure is not anything we have to worry about now. I think what we want to do is first, based on a discussion and finding out from the commission members your level of interest and concern and ideas for moving forward with it, we'll then take it to the next level, similar to what we've done with the Bell here. Do some more detailed research, a more detailed site assessment. Maybe have an arborist then, of course, look at the tree depending on its health. Great big trees can look precarious and be very healthy, oak trees in particular, and they may need only some careful pruning and attendance, and they'll live another 100 years. I mean, you may think it's at the end of its life, and it may still really be only middle age as oak trees go, as we know from the discussions of the other oak trees. So I'm not overly concerned, and sometimes, I mean, things are what they are, and if the tree is nudging that structure and it's got a little tilt to it, then I guess we have our own miniature Tower of Pisa.
Yeah, I agree.
Another comment about the pump house, for anybody who has not seen it, isn't familiar with it, it's not a large structure. It's a small structure. But again, it has a very historic feel. And one thing that occurs to me, and I hope what I'm about to speculate about doesn't happen, but if there are two lots there and one has a residence on it and the other doesn't, there's always the potential that somebody might say, could I build a second home on the second lot? And if they did that, they might say, I'm not happy with the pump house there. So, that is something that wouldn't be totally surprising. When I say that, there are very few lots still to be built upon in the whole Bird Streets area. It's 35 years ago, there were several lots, and they've all been pretty much all been built on since. You might find one or two opportunities still, but I hope that's not the future of the pump house.
What is one lot? It's not on its own separate lot, so that's a good thing. And the configuration of the lot and the size of the lot, I think, offers opportunity because that's where the lot is at its narrowest. And it would be difficult to try to divide that lot and put another structure there. Now, that said, obviously with the state laws that pertain to accessory dwelling units and that sort of thing, it wouldn't be hard to do that. But then again, you could still do that on the wider part of the lot because that lot is so large, really. So I think there's opportunity. The city could work with the property owner on, for example, an easement or something, so that by doing that, they don't have to pay taxes, really. They're going to have a part of the property that, from the assessor's standpoint, would not be taxable. As, again, an example. So I think there would be opportunities the city could explore.
And I might suggest this might be a very good time, if I'm correct in what is totally speculation, that the property may be going through transition. And if it is, that might be a good time to work with whoever turns out to be the new owner. And the other thing I might say, the other thing that happens with properties in this area is, if there's a lot that can be built upon, pretty soon you find a new home on it. But the other thing that happens is the small homes that are kind of one-story ranch-style homes, they turn into two-story homes. They get expanded. In fact, there's one right across the street from this property that is now being probably more than doubled in size. And so, we'll see where it goes, but let's try to save the pump house.
Yeah. I think the commissioners would be glad to know that the structure's already on our radar, in our crosshairs, all of those things, because it has already been inventoried and it's an eligible resource by virtue of that survey. So knowing that, then at whatever time somebody, a current owner or a future owner, wants to change what's on that property to get development permits, it's flagged in our building permit software system. And as soon as anybody, it didn't even have to be our department, it could be another department, looks it up, that flag, if you will, digitally alerts them that it's a historic resource exists on that property, and they have to come find me before they can do anything. And that way we're alerted, and we can make sure the property owners know that that's something they're going to have to work around and through and work with the city to achieve what hopefully we're talking about tonight, and they'd be participating, hopefully willingly, and we'd get something done at that time. But we can't make them do it. We don't know when somebody's gonna do something. But we can reach out to whoever the owner of record is in the meantime and see if we can't initiate some interest. But I guarantee you, once they would come in with interest on building on that property, we're going to remind them that they have this asset that is a shared asset, and we'd like to have them helping us protect it. Yeah, absolutely.
Good. Yes.
I was just wondering, does Las Virgenes Water have anything to do with that?
They don't.
They don't.
No, I mean, the municipal water district, I think, was created in 1958.
Oh.
And the subdivision there was, I think, recorded in 28 or something like that. And so, no. But it's interesting you point that out. You could think of it as sort of a precursor to a water district. They created their own, system, or at least planned it to service that community, that subdivision. It just never materialized.
Could the pump ever work again? Is there
Well, there is, if you look at the building, if you were to walk up to it, it's just a shell.
Yeah.
The guts were removed probably, remember, we were in a Great Depression.
Yeah.
And anything that you could repurpose was going to get repurposed. That could still work either in its original form or some adapted form. And machinery, pumps, that sort of thing, it got reused. It got pulled out and put in use somewhere else.
Is there a pipe that you can see that runs down?
Well, I didn't go into it.
Yeah.
I didn't walk into it. I didn't have my spelunker outfit on.
Your hazmat suit.
But that would be something we'd probably try to do with the owner's permission, of course.
Yeah.
That was the other thing. We didn't have the owner's permission, so of course we didn't go inside.
Yeah.
I think what has appealed for me to it is the sort of Art Nouveau feel about it. It just its lines, the way the shell is built, has a look that evokes another era, and it does fit with the one or two other structures that are still in the Park Moderne area. At the top of the Bird Streets, there's that interesting sculptural structure that is the only other thing I really think of that is similar in the community.
The Park Modern Fountain, of course,
Yeah,
aligns design-wise with this perfectly, which you would expect. That's another, obviously, original feature from the subdivision. And one of our landmarks.
and when you refer to the fountain, is that the structure at the top of the bird path? Or is
Yes.
it- Yes, and what's interesting about that is it has fuses of a kind that were used 100 years ago, built into the concrete structure. It's a kind of fuse that I last saw anywhere else about 60 years ago.
Wow.
And they were old then, they were old. But it's, it's part of, working with materials in that era that we would not do we just don't do anything like that today.
I agree. My first house was built in 1928, and I had those fuses in my first house.
Ah, wow.
So I think the next step is we make a motion to ask that staff looks into this further for consideration as a historic landmark for the
That
city.
would be an appropriate motion, sure,
Okay.
if you want
I
to make that one.
Do make that motion then.
I'll second it.
Good.
Okay.
Those in favor? Aye.
All right.
Very good.
Good.
Good discussion, members of the commission, and of course, I don't know if Carol's watching, but in case she is, we'll just say we missed your input on that and would have loved it, but we'll get it the next time.
That's right.
Good.
Okay, and I don't know, by the way, what the status is of a new appointee for the vacated position that Matt had. So, in case anybody's scratching their head over that one, unfortunately, I don't have any updates. But I'll look into it, and whatever we learn, Liz will probably send you an update by email.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank
All
you.
right. So we're on to the next item. Okay.
The El Camino Real Bell.
Yes, so I'm going to apologize first that you guys are going to see mostly a repetition of what you saw last time. And that's for, I suppose, three reasons. One is I didn't want to redo something I'd already done. Number two, the work that as I reviewed it is basically all the information we need to consider for a designation. So I might as well represent it. And then three, members of the public are always part of the audience, and that members of the public includes people in the room, as well as people watching via CTV or the internet from the city's website. And we never know who that is and whether they know anything about this. And this gives me an opportunity to educate everybody a little bit on what the commission is considering this evening. So if you'll bear with me, there will be some repetition here, but I also have some new anecdotes to share as we go along.
We look forward to them.
So the El Camino Real bells were markers, and they were established as a way to monument the 700-mile El Camino Real, which was basically the road that linked the Spanish missions and presidios along the California coast and short distances inland from the coast, and extending from what is now Mexico. All of this was, you had California del Sur, the Southern California, and del Norte, which was Northern California. And this, what's really in the United States is what was California del Norte. So this is an indication of where the El Camino Real bell system was distributed along the El Camino Real roadway, the 700 miles from between San Francisco, basically, or Sonoma, down to San Diego. And 21 missions and I think 4 presidios were spread across that distance, and you see the missions are shown here on this replica map. In 1963, the 700-mile El Camino Real was designated a California state historical landmark, particularly number 784. So these bells did one other thing that was clearly very important, and that was to help the new automobile traveling public find their way around. If you put yourself back in history to that period of time, of course, the automobile was the equivalent in that age to the computer in the 1990s through today. And it opened up so much to people who otherwise would not have been able to travel, including not just disabled persons to be included, but people that might not otherwise go hiking miles and miles at a time, of course, or by horseback. This opened things up. They could go greater distances. It was amazing. And autos, of course, became more and more affordable relative to what people earned. The price kept being driven down. More were built in Ford factories, for example, that type of thing. So this was a burgeoning industry of a proportion we probably can't even imagine how fast all this was growing. And that includes our roadway system. So what had started with bicycle popularity, and most people have forgotten how big the bicycle boom was in the 1890s. The Good Roads movement started with that and the bicycling public, and then transitioned into the motoring public and took even greater, a greater sense of urgency and importance. And so you had this whole program was part of that to help the motoring public get from point A to point B. So the signs were an integral part. Now, I'd like to point out this sign right now because Calabasas is right there in the bottom right-hand corner of that sign. And it says that Calabasas is 10 miles to the right. And it also includes Camarillo, the Mission del San Fernando. It has Ventura, or San Buenaventura is on this, and all those distances. And by my looking through the distances, what I've determined is this sign that you see on the left, and that bell marker is approximately the county line between Ventura and Los Angeles.
Cool.
Okay? So there's one that's actually local, that by happenstance I'd found this, and then it was later, since the last meeting, that I discovered that that's where this one was located.
Does that
I thought
still
you'd be
exist,
interested.
Tom? Does that sign still?
I beg your pardon?
I wonder if that one still exists in its current location.
Yeah, I don't know. I haven't had time to go looking
That's
around.
really cool, though. Wow.
But who's to say exactly where that was?
Yeah.
You know, for the original Ventura Highway, if it were. I mean, it wasn't even Ventura Highway in 1913, or whenever this was taken exactly. So they really served an important purpose for that. And as you can imagine, and I think the left-hand photo is a great example, it's not like these roads were so well established that you necessarily knew when this dirt road met this dirt road where exactly you were going to go. But if you had this telling you, that was helpful. So
It makes me think of the local hiking trails we have
exactly,
up in the mountains.
not different from that.
Like, which way did we go?
So now, this was one of many efforts. The philanthropic organizations and men's and women's clubs, there was an awful lot that was going on at the turn of the 20th century in terms of citizen involvement through volunteer organizations for the betterment of the society. And these are some of the agencies that actually played active roles in developing and rolling out the marker program that started in 1906 and included our bell that was put in place in 1913. So Mrs. A.S.C. Forbes was perhaps the most pivotal character in this process. She's the one that designed the bell and staff. She orchestrated and oversaw the casting of the bells. I've got a note there just to point out that I'll say more about that in a little bit. And she served as the chair for the committee that was doing all the installations. So she was basically the woman in charge. She ran things. She and her husband, well, I'll get to that in a minute, which is now. She and her husband owned at least one foundry in LA. And they're the ones that cast the bell. And it may have been from any one of those entities. We don't know exactly which one, or it could have been multiples. Now, the drawings that you see here, they indicate an overall height of just under 10 feet. It's like 9 3/4 feet, but the height actually kind of varies. Our estimate of the bell that we have is more than 10 feet, maybe even 11. And it probably depended on how you did your footings and that sort of thing. But the bells are uniform, and the design of the staffs is uniform in terms of having a place to mount the direction and that sort of thing. I find it interesting that in here, right, this is Mrs. Forbes right here making this, helping this man make the pour a mold. Now, I think it's a photo op, and she's wearing a nice protective overcoat, so that's a good thing. But if you notice her footwear, it probably doesn't meet OSHA standards. But good for her. I mean, she got her hands dirty here, and she was the person behind this. She did all the heavy lifting, basically, from everything that I was reading. Really impressive.
Tom, I don't think anyone's wearing gloves in that picture.
I noticed that as well. Surprising. So the bells were accomplished under, as I mentioned, any of these different companies that were either somehow controlled by the Forbes, Mr. and Mrs. Forbes. And over the many decades, there have been variations of the bell designs with slightly different profiles, dimensions, material lettering, what have you. But this diagram I'm showing here is for the original bell as designed and configured for the installations as part of the project that started in 1906. So the El Camino Real Association Executive Committee, of which Ms. Forbes was chair, basically approved it in 1906, and the first bell was installed in Los Angeles in 1906. Second bell installed later in San Diego. So at that point then, the idea was to move up north and get the bells installed. Now, I'm sure there were probably some that were hit and miss here and there, but I think that the idea was to start south and work north. So they had planned on distributing approximately 700 miles of bells at one every mile. So 700 bells. By 1913, the time that our bell was installed, there was estimated to be 400 bells, more or less, along the route. 4 decades later, a Caltrans inventory revealed that of that 400 or so, only 128 remained. And by 1974, there were fewer than 100. So public interest picked up again that this is important, and Caltrans had a new program for replacing bells, and they allocated money and began in earnest on that. The bells that were put in place, and you can see plenty along Highway 101, are cast concrete. They're painted and they're shaped and everything to emulate this. They look just like it, but if you were to pull over, and I don't recommend you pull over on the 101, but if you were, and to take a look at it, you'd find out it's a concrete, a light form of concrete, but nonetheless that. They don't ring. There are no clappers, nothing like that. The original bell, by the way, also included a clapper. It did have a working hinge. The original bells had all that, and our clapper is no longer in place for our bell.
Tom, help me understand why you need a clapper and a bell. I mean, you're going to ring it to let cars know you're coming, or what's the...
I think it just had to do with originality, trying to be consistent with what a bell would be.
Okay.
It's just being honest to the design of a bell.
Okay.
Whether somebody would want to ring it for any reason, I don't know.
Okay.
It's no more clappers later. I mean, they were being removed anyway. I mean, that's what happened to this one.
Okay.
So the State Department of Highways is charged with maintaining the markers along the highway and everything. They don't maintain our bell. Some of these old ones they're on private property or not Caltrans responsibilities. This is the bell in Ventura that I happen to be showing here. Their original bell. I don't know when this photo was taken, unfortunately. It says that LA is 60 miles one direction and Santa Barbara Mission 32 miles the other way. And here's another bell. In this case, you got San Gabriel one direction 12 miles and San Fernando Mission the other way 23 miles. And then here's another one at a later stage, later age. Not the same bell, a different one. This profile of the crook with this real gentle curve, that is something that's unique, not especially unique, but it's definitely a characteristic of the original bells and staffs. You'll see others that have a little more rectilinear kind of shape, and those are not original staffs. This is the Old Town Calabasas bell right here at this location. You could just sort of barely see it there. And the Kramer Store building is right here, and this is the old oak tree that unfortunately died about, I don't know, 6 years ago. 6 or 7 years ago, and then the stump was there for a couple of years, and then that had to be removed as well, and we have a new tree that was planted immediately afterwards. And you've seen some photos, and I think I'll have another one here shortly. But you can see here that this bell and staff standing perfectly straight is right in front of that oak tree. That's important because every photo I've ever encountered of it from the past, that's where it is. I've not seen it any other place. As I mentioned, in terms of the characteristics of the Calabasas bell, the overheight is almost 11 feet. It has raised lettering around the rim, the front and back, and across the front of the bell. The mounting ring inside the bell is there for the clapper, which is missing. The bell is approximately 18 inches high and 18 inches wide and weighs approximately 92 pounds. I did not weigh it myself. I looked that up. The iron post or staff consists of two segments. There's a 3-inch diameter vertical lower portion and a 1.5-inch diameter curved upper portion. That's the part with the nice soft curve with a swivel mount that would allow the bell to ring if you had wanted it to, and I'm sure that swivel is not swiveling anymore. The iron post or staff I mentioned, approximately 4 feet up our post there is a brass dedication plaque indicating that it was installed in 1913 by the Los Angeles County Board of Supervisors. So here's our bell. You can see that I call it a universal joint attachment here that would allow it to swing if it wasn't rusty. And what's important to see here is you've got these dates here that are part of the cast. The 1769 is when the El Camino Real, quote unquote, was initially purposed for connecting the presidios and missions. So that's when the Spanish initiated this notion of a road to link their missions and presidios. Now, a road that wasn't just created out of nowhere because, of course, the indigenous populations were already traveling themselves as well. So we don't want to forget that. But in terms of a road with an intent to make it easier to travel and, of course, using it on a regular basis by the Spanish conquest, that definitely happened. And so that's what that date recognizes there. 1906, of course, is when the bell installation started. So what's equally important, if not more important, for our bell and understanding where it falls in this whole timeline, and I mentioned there were like 13 different types of bells you could find if you look it all up. Well, this is one of the originals, and we know that because it says it's copyrighted 1906 by Mr. Dacey. This is the original casting. And then the Board of Supervisors plaque is still 100% intact here from 1913. So this is the bell just when we planted this new oak tree. Okay? We believe it's first generation from the original castings because of everything I've told you, and based on the historic photos. There are plenty others that we've seen and are in our archives that show it in that exact location. When the old oak tree was removed, the bell was not removed. they didn't take it out and put it back. They left it there. They carefully worked around it.
Oh.
So it remains exactly where it was. Now, I'd used this slide last time as well, and I think it bears emphasis that, and I mentioned it just a moment ago, it connected the missions and presidios, but it wasn't necessarily the original road, right? This was a means of travel for the indigenous peoples before that, and we don't want to lose sight of that. That is as much a reason for recognizing this route. Now, the bells themselves, of course, are a specific thing at a specific time and with more than one purpose, because I pointed out they're also a travel aid. And I think their historic significance has more to do with that than the ancestral past, but it's not entirely independent of that, right? It builds upon it. And I think that's an important point to make. So, and I pointed this out before, every once in a while somebody might be in Old Town and they'll see this bell. This bell is just on the other side of the street, and it is in memory of Grace Halsey Williamson. I looked this up since our last meeting, and Mrs. Williamson was a native daughter of the Golden West, which, as you can see right here, that this organization honored her with this bell in 1967. So almost 60 years ago, about 55 years anyway, roughly, they installed this bell. And she was a member of one of those organizations that I showed on the earlier slide was behind the placement of the bells in the original project.
Okay.
Now, I tried to find out if this woman had played any kind of instrument or role, but I wasn't able to find anything. We will dig more into that because I think as we would research this before we get to council, if you decide that you want to recommend to council, if we can find that little nugget of information, we'll want to bring that forward to them because that's an interesting point, I think, is that you'd have something across the street that is recognizing another person that may have played a role in having that bell placed there. I don't know.
Yeah, 100%. It's got the curvature of the original bells, right? So there might be more to that story there. You know, I think you're on the right track there, Tom.
So we'll see if we can find something there. The internet's amazing to be able to find that stuff out. I'm sitting there looking at stuff, and I'm going to try not to mention any particular companies who do things, but there are ones who specialize in family ancestral research, and we might see if we can't dig through that. I tend to not start doing that because I don't want to create an account for what I'm doing with our research. I'll try to go to university archives and things like that. And so far through that, I wasn't uber successful, but we'll keep looking. So I had a number of sources I consulted. These were all the ones I listed last time, although I also now have added this one because this was another one consulted for some additional information and fact check what I presented to you before. So that's pretty much it. Everything else is in the written report. To summarize, the bell is definitely a significant resource. I think its placement and its ongoing existence in the same location. A key aspect of historic preservation is not just to have an intact structure or object, but to have it in its original location is especially beneficial because that allows people to understand history in place. And so that's something that we find important. And the fact that the Kramer store continues to exist right behind it means you've got a context that is intact as well. So I think it's really an excellent opportunity before something else would happen. The city, we learned, just today that there is an easement there that the city has so that we can maintain the oak tree. And I think I had a picture of the oak tree. Oh, I forgot to put the new picture in. But if you'd seen the bell, and if you remember the photos I showed last time, actually, the beginning of the show showed it. So you can see in that image, if we can get it back up, you can see in this image that the oak tree has really proliferated.
Yeah.
And you can almost not see the bell. Well, if you go over there tomorrow, you'll be able to see the bell just fine because the city's public works team and the landscape maintenance district went over there, was it just this morning? Just this morning and pruned the oak tree. I mean, they did it appropriately, consistent with appropriate standards and guidelines for oak tree pruning. And and you need to do that so that the oak tree will grow in a healthy way instead of haphazardly like you can see here. So that was accomplished, and the bell is now visible alongside the tree instead of within the tree. So I hope you guys will take a look sometime soon before the tree envelops it again.
I just wanted to mention that name Halsey. That rings a bell with me. You're laughing. Did I lose it, or there was a Halsey, I think, I want to say Water District up here.
Yes.
Is that the same family?
That's a good question. I'm going to go to the plaque.
I want to say Hal.
Hal Halsey, I think you're
Yeah.
right. Where's the plaque? Here we go. Where'd you find Halsey?
The gal's name,
Oh, from the end there.
yeah, I think back.
There may be.
There
Who
it
knows?
is.
Oh, there it is.
Right.
Yep.
Grace Halsey.
It wouldn't be a huge surprise if we would find that there's a family lineage link there somewhere, but and maybe we'll find that out.
Okay.
That's interesting. It's
I don't know why.
for it to be a pure coincidence is
Yeah,
that could be true, but we'll check.
okay.
Yeah, because that Halsey was instrumental in having the water district formed
I thought
in the first
so.
place.
So I didn't know if it was the same family or not.
Could be. Okay.
Tom,
Thank
I
you
have
for
two
that.
questions.
That tidbit.
One is, have you ever found a photograph of the bell here in Calabasas that had a road sign on it saying 27 miles to Los Angeles or something like that?
Yeah, I have not found, well, let's see here. Let me go back up. To one of the old photos. There was a sign on there, I believe. Yeah, there is a sign on there. Right here, you can see it.
Yep.
But so far, I've not found one where you can, that the image is clear enough and close enough that I can read what's on a sign. But they all had signs. I don't think I have any old photos of it. They all had signs. So,
You know, it was-
because that was instrumental. If you looked at the drawing, when I showed you the drawing, there actually was even a cross-section through the part of the post that had the mount for a sign so they could make sure that they all had the mount so you could put a sign on it.
you know, it's interesting, that gas station was a 76 station in the photo here, and I think later on it was a Chevron, a Standard Oil.
I'm not sure.
I think so.
My other question is this, and I'll lay a context for it. I once lived in San Juan Bautista, where the mission is, and down over the hill from one side of the mission was an exposed section of the old original El Camino Real. And in that area, it was paved, not with pavement as we would, but with sort of inlaid brick pavements. And I'm wondering, have you ever run across any information whether the El Camino Real, as it ran through Calabasas, was a dirt road or paved with brick, or what it looked like?
The only information I've been able to find, and none of it is uber specific, but is that it was dirt, gravel and asphalt eventually, but portions of the old Ventura Freeway, the original, were concrete, of course. But the El Camino Real of that era such as in the photo that I have up now from the gas station, and judging from the vehicle in the photo and some other things, this is probably pre-World War II, in the 30s sometime. Oh, I'm
Up
sorry,
in
I didn't have it
San
over
Juan
there.
Bautista, we're talking about the early 1800s, the part that's
Correct.
exposed. And so it was actually, that section was actually, paved with, brick pavers back then.
By the Spanish then,
Yeah,
right?
right.
Or cobbles, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's something that happened, but not here.
And my recollection is they were sort of fired bricks, almost as you would, they made the adobe, but they made that out of mud and straw. But they had fired bricks too.
Interesting. That's great. Well, bricks were definitely the way you paved a road back then. Even the Indianapolis Motor Speedway was bricks, the whole thing originally. So, yeah, town centers everywhere were brick streets at that time, before asphalt was perfected. So, cyclists didn't like the bricks too much.
Right.
They don't like them now either. But
Well, thanks to you and Joel for making the presentation, all three presentations today. I think it's a lot of good information here. I'm totally supportive of this. I mean, it's original bell in its original location. There were 100 of them in the 40s, and then in the 70s there were less than half that. So we've got to preserve it. So.
okay. I do have another anecdotal, if you will, thing. In front of everybody this evening that you didn't have last time is a copy of this document. And this is a publication that was done by the Automobile Club of Southern California in 1915. So they did these long, narrow map series. This was the early form of what the Automobile Club was doing really nationwide, each state chapter, and it became something that later in the 1960s and 70s was known as their triptych. That's what the American Automobile Association published at that time. And they were back in this era, they were called strip maps. And the whole idea was you'd be able to just flip the map to the next roadway segment you were going to be on. And you'd, in conjunction with this kind of map, nowhere near the detail that people are used to today with a GIS and with the nav systems we have in cars. This was your nav system. A guide like this was in your glove box, and you would get to one of the bells, one of the signposts that was in an intersection would say Santa Barbara's however many miles that way, and you'd start heading down that way. So that's how the system worked. I thought you all would find that interesting. This is their particularly a quote mission tour one. So this was a special thing they did for just that. But you could get the strip maps for highway segments that would go from LA to Pasadena or wherever. Indianapolis to Chicago. See, I always bring up Indianapolis. I wonder why. I can't help it. My hometown. So what I brought for you guys to at least look at, these are the map pages from that document only, and I've blown them up. And if you guys want to look at them after the meeting, because it's fascinating to see what cities are on here, which cities were the more primary, most dominant cities of that age, which aren't necessarily in that rule today. They didn't grow where other cities did grow. Thousand Oaks, of course, is not on here because Thousand Oaks was founded in 1964, right? But Santa Paula is on here because Santa Paula was founded in 1903, and actually, as a city, I think started in about 1864, something like that. But it was incorporated in 1903. So you'll see things today on this map that are different, if you really think about it, than what you'd find today, not to mention the development generally. But it's fascinating to take a look at these, so I wanted you to know I have some enlarged copies here for you to take a look at. Obviously, this dovetails perfectly with the bells because the same Automobile Association was a sponsor of the whole bell program, right? So I just wanted to share that with you this evening as well as something above and beyond what you heard last time.
You remember
Thank
the
you.
old Thomas guides?
Yep.
Yeah.
Thomas guides were an even more sophisticated version of this, but yes, that was the next thing that rode in your car if you didn't have your AAA maps.
Yeah.
Interesting.
We have a resolution, just to finish, and I'm sorry I left that part out, the most important part perhaps. We have a resolution for the commission's consideration, which would be upon passage, your recommendation officially to the city council to designate the bell as a local historic landmark. And if you've got any questions about the resolution itself, I'll entertain that right now, or of course, whenever you're ready for a motion and an action, your chair will guide you through that. Thank you.
Good. Do we have such a motion?
I'd make a motion that we recommend this to the city council for a historic landmark status.
I am happy to second it.
And those in favor?
Aye.
Good.
Thank you very much. A very attentive audience. I appreciate it. And I'm looking forward to learning more. This has been a fascinating little historic research for me. I don't normally get to do that. I used to do it when I was before internet. I'd have to go to the library to do all this. It's amazing.
Yes.
What's a library?
Yeah, we have one right next door.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
We have one.
Right.
Okay, well, thank you for that one. And then I believe what are we to reports here, a future agenda?
Yes.
We don't have any projects that we're aware of that we can point to January as an actual item. For example, another sign permit or any kind of structure. So I can't point to something in the next, except for the pump house, because of the action you took this evening. We're going to want to bring that back to you. The oak trees we've not forgotten about. Just been busy with some other things. And so hopefully I'll be able to have, get somewhere with that. It's sort of the bottom line on that is that we know what the commission is basically asking for. We have to try to work with, or not try to, we will work with our own, I have to work with our director and Public Works and ultimately city manager on crystallizing what this idea would be and what it might cost, because it ultimately would have to be something that would be cooked into the city budget. And I want to be able to get that through, at least as an idea for them, and maybe with enough interest that it'd go into the budget for the next one, which would be the fiscal year that would start July 1 of 25. So that's sort of the direction we're taking. Preliminarily, there seems to be interest. I know our director, Mr. Klein, is supportive. I have discussed it with Public Works. Our deputy director, Tatiana Holden, is aware of it and is supportive. I don't believe that we've informed Director Castle yet, but we're working on it. So that's the only thing I think I have to report at this stage.
And for a moment, I'd like to mention something about the Masson House too. I have a friend who knows somebody who she believes used to live in that house. And back when my friend was growing up, she's 75, but she grew up in Topanga. And back then, the family that lived in the house, as she recalls it, were the Varneys, and she knew it as the Varney House. And there's a Gary Varney who is still around, and it might be a good idea to try to get in touch with him and learn more about the history of the Masson House, you know, based on what he or his wife could provide. Anyway, I may end up talking to Gary Varney through my friend.
I think that'd be fabulous, and if you could just, with some email or whatever, phone, just keep in touch with me and Joel.
Yes.
Let you know and pass along contact information. We'd be able to contact them ourselves directly. That'd be helpful.
Good.
That's real. opportunity.
Yes.
Love to explore that.
Good. And what strikes me is that there may be, an opportunity for even an oral history, a tape an interview, a tape recording where we might capture information that might not be available a few years from now.
Yeah, that's true.
It's an excellent idea. The time you most wish you'd done a recording is when it's too late. So we're making note of that, and we'll for sure, I think, act on that. We'll do what we can do without imposing on anybody unnecessarily. I think that's an excellent idea.
Yeah, I'll get you more
And the
information.
Massing House is
as I
definitely
can.
still on our radar as well, and it's in the budget. We did get it in the budget for the 5-year budget for CIP, Capital Improvement Program. It's in there for the latter years, I believe 2028-ish. The cost, if you guys might remember from the report that was done 2 years ago, is north of $700,000. And so it's going to take getting some resources. The city's also looking into getting some grant support to hire either a person or a part-time person or an entity, I don't know exactly which, to help the city with grant writing and searching for grants all across the board for whatever. And if and when that comes to fruition, we're going to take full advantage of that for this particular project and see what we can come up with. So that's the only thing I can tell you about the Masson House. I mean, it's part of the Headwaters Corner, which is the land that all surrounds it, that also included the, I always forget the name of the house that burned down, but the other house that was there. And the Mountains Restoration Trust / Tree People that had offices there. Because of some, I don't want to put this, some activity and discussions at a minimum, and some legal issues that surround Headwaters Corner itself, that could play a role in terms of timing for trying to get something done with the Masson House. But it's not going to get in the way of trying to find grant money. So we already know what has to be done. We know what it's likely to cost. And we're going to continue to move in that direction. And we don't have to worry about whether Headwaters Corner issues are going to stall it, because we're not going to be able to get anything done for a while anyway, because this will take time to get this all put together and to be able to have a funded project. So I'm not worried, but your patience is greatly appreciated, and I think we're just going to have to be patient a little longer while we work on it.
Good.
So that for sure is all I have.
Michael, just a couple of things before we close. So Sunday is the Pumpkin Festival, right? So Calabasas is like big event, right? And I mean, our namesake, it could either be Calabasa, for the Spanish word for winter squashes, or Calabasas, which may have been a Chumash name for where the wild geese fly, which that's on our website, which is good information. So that's Sunday, 10 to 5, and I'd invite folks that are, watching on TV to go get some tickets, because it's still available, and it's a great event. So thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other announcements or thoughts before we adjourn?
Good meeting.
Good. Thank you.
I make a motion that we adjourn the meeting.
I'll second it.
And all in favor, aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Thank you all very much. And I appreciate all the effort and the consideration. The next meeting is scheduled for January 5th at 6:00 p.m. So it will be a new year when we meet again.
See you next year, Tom and
Thank you.
Joel.
Yes.
Happy holidays.
Right.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.